Good morning or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the MetaNetTV Livestream for August 2019. Once again, we're very lucky to have Dr. Craig S. Wright with us today, Chief Scientist at nChain and inventor of Bitcoin. Craig, how's it going?
Not too bad.
Yeah.
I'm here. It's a lovely sort of between summer and autumn type day. Got myself a nice cup of coffee. Weekend's coming up. Not too bad.
Now, I know it's we're in the middle of August, or we're at the end of August now, and it's typically called the silly season, where nothing much happens or stupid things happen, and I think we've had a bit of both. So tell me, what's on your mind at the moment?
I've got papers I've got to get into my supervisors for my PhDs, which probably sounds strange to most people because they say PhDs, not I'm doing multiples. I've got exams coming up in October. I've got presentations for a conference. I'm presenting 4 papers in next week. I've got the normal patents and everything like that to be filed to keep going. Yeah, life's busy.
How many patents have you filed in the last month?
I have no idea.
Is it kind of like an automated process now?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, right.
I mean, we're up to the original idea white paper type thing is now 13, 14, or 15, 15. So,
yeah. Well,
would be a bit faster if I had a few things out of the way, but that's life.
I can imagine. And otherwise, how else have you been spending your summer?
Yeah, fairly much just working.
Yeah. Just working. Well,
fairly much. That's most of my life. Whether it's
fairly
much just working, whatever other than research, it's work. A little bit of family time, work.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad you're getting some normality in there as well.
I try.
So tell me, did you have to go to Florida this week to attend court in person?
I didn't have to, no.
But you did?
Yes.
All right. Well, I've got a whole bunch of questions that I've asked people on Twitter this week, and we got some good ones. And naturally, most people are going to want to know about the court case and everything that happened there this week. And there's also been a lot of disinformation, I'd say, on the crypto media. I mean, crypto media is kind of famous for disinformation.
Is there ever any real information on crypto media?
No.
There's no journalists in crypto media, I found. Basically, there's a whole lot of fake news paid trolls, which is part of the whole reason of MetaNet. I mean, part of the whole creation of Bitcoin is the commercialization of the internet. It's not this anti-government thing people talk about. And over the next few months, they're going to start realizing just how wrong they were. Immutable means you have a record. That doesn't mean that it can't change. So where people say Bitcoin, you own the keys, you own Bitcoin. No, you don't.
Right.
Actually, if someone steals your keys, you don't own, the person with the transferred Bitcoin doesn't own it. Bitcoin acts within law. So I'll give you something that people don't realize. Government can actually result in court orders being issued to seize and transfer Bitcoin. There's none of this, you don't get to do whatever. Wrong. If you think that, you really are deluded. And you're going to start figuring out that the reality of all this is it requires things over international law, and you need to have things that will stand across multiple jurisdictions. But when you're talking crime, proceeds of crime, terrorism funding, whatever else, that's easy. So as an example, if you send, say, $1 million worth of Bitcoin to a Syrian terrorist fund, then the results of that are that you could get a worldwide freezing order and a proceeds of crime order across multiple jurisdictions, and you could then have miners have to make the change, and the government could just seize that Bitcoin. Now, people go, oh, that's bad. Well, no, it's actually, that's the whole reason for it. This is part of why I invented Bitcoin, why it has an immutable evidence trail. An immutable evidence trail doesn't mean immutability of ownership. In micropayments, it's really secure that way, and it's easy and it's low cost. But when we're talking large amounts, especially single addresses and all this BS people are doing with BTC, then it's really easy to take. Yeah. So if you had a Silk Road address, like there was at one stage with 100 and something thousand Bitcoin in there, the government, if they'd realized, could have just gone there and grabbed all of that and said, this is ours. Mm-hmm. And they're a precedent for all this. Liberty Reserve was a cryptocurrency, and the takedown was over 42 countries simultaneously. Not the US, most of Europe, China, Russia. I mean, this is one of the few times where China, Russia, the US, and Britain, and France agreed. I mean, we're talking a scenario where the US and Russia agreed on something simultaneously, and
first time ever.
The British and the French also agreed on something.
Oh, that's never happened before.
Occasionally, but it has to be really big.
Right. So the question about a court ordering miners to make amendments to the blockchain, that's always made me curious. Could a judge in one court, in one country, compel all Bitcoin miners around the world to roll back the blockchain or add a transaction that undid another one or something like that?
No. When you're talking about a freezing order or worldwide freezing order or seizure orders or claims, whatever else, and you're talking multi-jurisdictional actions, what you then have to do is you have to enforce the order. Mm-hmm. So, for example, there was a recent case with a freezing order here in Britain. And there's an order against Coinbase and some of the exchanges saying this Bitcoin has been stolen. You're not allowed to enact. Now, right. What would have to happen is when the judgment has been granted, then you would have to go to the other countries and seek an enforcement order. Now, if it's something about a crime or property ownership or whatever else that's recognized in many jurisdictions, then governments can act. But when it's something that's not illegal in both countries, then that's where you have problems. So if you had two countries that you had to file in, and country A sees this as a crime and country B doesn't, then you can't get an order. Mm-hmm. But if you have something where country A and country B and whatever other countries all see this as being kind of a criminal act, then you would actually be able to enforce it in multiple jurisdictions. So this limits global power. Mm-hmm. You don't have a world government or anything. What you end up with is the really bad things like funding hard drugs, funding terrorism, money laundering. All of these are something that can be stopped globally. Blackmail even. So one of the things people don't realize yet, but what you would have is you would have an order written on the blockchain, and that would then enable all of this to be enacted. Now, when I released the alert key the first time, to much dismay from many people who then said Satoshi's centralized and how evil I am and all the rest the first time, going back to 2010 when everyone said, oh no, Satoshi's centralized. Well, part of the alert key was the ability to send out something saying that this address can't be moved.
Right.
The initial part was when there are problems, there's a bug with the software or whatever else. But the aim was eventually to be able to extend this. And one of the things I'd like to eventually see would be if we could have something where, for instance, there could be country keys and a high court of one country or the UN or whatever else could vote on certain things.
Mm-hmm. Those are curious examples. I think when you talk about these, you're always talking about things like human trafficking or terrorism. I mean, those are things that pretty much everyone agrees are bad. But we're going to have cases where someone in some country, say China, for example, considers some comment a crime, and maybe they say it's causing unrest, spreading disinformation, must be stopped. and or a group that's doing that kind of thing. We've got an example going on in Hong Kong at the moment where we have maybe Facebook and Google who are censoring posts on one side and permitting them on the other. And I think that those are more contentious issues. People can't really agree whether they're crimes or not. How long before we see one of them in Bitcoin?
Well, that's a different issue. What people don't get there is, again, it's not illegal everywhere. Mm-hmm. So the Chinese government would go over saying, we want an enforcement in America as well. And they'd approach the American government who would go, we see that as free speech. The Chinese government will jump up and down and the American government will go, well, we've got these trade sanctions and all that sort of stuff. And basically everyone jumps up and down and nothing happens. So what you have to consider in these sort of situations is if it's not multi-jurisdictional, then it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. If the Chinese jump up and down and go, we've got this dealer of fentanyl, or the Americans go, there's these Chinese, like the Treasury said, we want to put orders against these Chinese fentanyl dealers. Well, they could go and lodge something with the Chinese court. And the Chinese court has a death penalty for fentanyl dealers anyway, so it's even worse for them. But the Americans and the Chinese could negotiate who gets what and carve up the drug lords' holdings. Mm-hmm. So putting together the legal framework has been part of what I've been doing for the last few years with my my PhD in law. Mm-hmm. So in particular, I'm looking at the British focus and how you could, from Britain, go out. But it also applies to China and the US. I haven't touched on places like Germany or France and their wacky sort of codified law yet. And I'm not going to because I'm going to be a French lawyer. But
no one should ever be a French lawyer.
I mean, think about this, how this will change the nature of many things like crime. Yeah. Imagine someone tries to blackmail you. Mm-hmm. Imagine it's not just Bitcoin, but tokenized pounds. And they say, if you don't do this, I'm going to do X. Send me 100,000 pounds, right?
Yep.
And then after the event, you can go to the police and go, these guys kidnapped my daughter and we're going to do this, and I had to send the money. Here's the evidence now on the blockchain, and here's where I recorded on a separate transaction what's happening. Here's my proof that I did this. I've got my daughter back. Go get my money. Mm-hmm. And the police could go out there, instantly start freezing Bitcoin, which is actually way easier than people think, mm-hmm. and then transfer. Now, the immutability is still there. What will end up happening is you will see where the blackmail happened. You will see the kidnap payment. And then you will see the court order. And that will be there forever. And you will see the government coming in and swooping down and grabbing these people who stole the money. And all of that evidence will be public forever. That's what the blockchain really is about. Mm-hmm. It stops corruption. It stops crime. It stops all these things. It's not anonymous. If you read that little section on the privacy model of Bitcoin, it doesn't say anonymity. It says identity. Yeah. So the new model is one where instead of having to trust a third party like Visa or a bank or something like this, I can now deal peer-to-peer with other people, not anonymously. Mm-hmm. Only the two of us know our identity. So if I wanted to trade with you, I still have an identity. I still purchase, I still have KYC, AML, all that stuff, but no one else other than you and I need to have it.
Is there any way a court could order the de-anonymization, I mean, for want of a better word, of a Bitcoin address? Or is that something that your forensics firm like Chainalysis would have to do?
No, they could order that anyway. Mm-hmm. And this is where people get it wrong. So MLD5 comes into effect in Europe, which is the money laundering directive. MLD4 would have actually covered Bitcoin, except too many people are up there in the air going, I don't really understand this stuff. But it's really explicit in MLD5. It actually covers cryptocurrency. It covers custodial wallets, etc. Now, a lot of people like Binance are sitting there going, we're not covered. We don't need to care because we're an exchange and we're not holding people's coins. That's BS. There's no such thing. If you are an exchange and you are moving people's coins, then you actually own the keys and whatever else. You're a custodial service.
Mm-hmm.
So you're covered. If you don't have KYC, AML, all that stuff for everyone, then you're a criminal. Very simple.
And everyone would include even the really small traders, trading less than $200 a day or something like that.
There are limits for all these things, what you need to report.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're only trading within the minimal amounts per month, etc., then who cares?
Yeah.
If you follow the law, if say you sell 50 Bitcoin a day to someone and $50 worth of Bitcoin a day and you're way under any limits, then you're under limits. Okay. If you're going through all the provisions correctly, then you're, it comes down to what the law is. So if you're trading on an exchange, in your identity.
Mm-hmm. Did we lose audio there, or did you did you stop talking?
I stopped, so I don't know if.
Okay, no worries. Speaking on the topic of court orders and such things,
mm-hmm.
We've. I have to go there. Sorry, we have to talk about the Ira Cleman case. Now, this
you don't
order.
Have to, but you want to.
I would rather not, to be honest, because I think all of this drama is kind of tangential to the whole Bitcoin story. But at the same time, it's kind of relevant and it's what everyone wants to hear. But mainly what I would like to hear is a bit of truth straight from the horse's mouth, because we had some people saying that the case was over, that you'd lost, a judge had ordered you to pay. Now I've read the judgment and I don't see in there any order for you to pay. So could you just explain exactly what happens next, or what where you're going from here?
Going.
Yeah, it's not even close.
In a way, it's opened up certain aspects for us.
Yeah.
He's saying that there's a partnership. So therefore, what is the partnership?
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that there are other people who were involved with W&K Info Defense.
Yeah.
That will start coming out. So we will now start adducing evidence about all of the history of this. I've just had lawyers pick up about 25 bankers' boxes worth of documents. No one realizes how much work was actually going behind the scenes of everything I've been doing over the last 10 years.
I'm sure they don't.
No, and those 25 are only 10% of what there is digitally.
Yeah.
There are some fun things that are going to come out with McCormick things and whatever else. I don't think people realize I paid my tax on my Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
I'll actually give you I'll read a little quote for you.
Please.
This is from a tax document, and I can dig it up.
Australian or British?
Australian.
Uh-huh.
So keep talking while we're doing that, but then I'll look down and I'll dig something up for you.
Okay, sure.
We'll have a little bit of fun when this comes out. Here we go. So we're talking about the something I did for the tax year ending June 2013 when I was paying my tax then.
Mm-hmm.
I actually requested things on GST because there was a whole lot of issues around GST in Australia. And I actually, unlike people who are running around going, Bitcoin's anonymous and Bitcoin's able to get around things, I paid $3.2 million worth of tax claim in 2013.
You actually paid that in dollars.
What Bitcoin was worth in that part of the of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, around $60, I think.
Pre-Mt. Gox in the first boom, real boom. So I went to the tax office and I actually did what is called a private ruling.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to them and said, I want basically you to decide this. so that I don't get in trouble. And then they change their mind afterwards. That's a different matter, though. So got a little bit about Bitcoin, total misunderstanding of it, which is typical of the government. So ruling is based on facts stated in the here. So blah, blah, blah. And my ruling comes down, and people are going to find this out soon. They keep calling it account. I don't know why they do that. It's not an account.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just don't think they have any better word for it.
Coin. Facts. I'll skip through all the BS about what Bitcoin is according to them. But the first bit here, talking to me, you invested a substantial amount of money in computer hardware and advanced scientific computing systems with the purpose of making substantial profit from mining and selling Bitcoins. You're an Australian resident, registered for goods and services with whatever number. In 2009, you started mining Bitcoins. You invested a substantial amount of money in computer hardware and advanced scientific computing systems with the purpose of making a substantial profit. You had a Bitcoin wallet, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into how many. You transferred Bitcoins to an Australian company, blah, blah, blah. I won't say how many. You created and in return received a number of shares in the company. The company is registered for GST. You will retain the remaining Bitcoins that are not transferred to the company. Your intention is for the company to operate as a Bitcoin bank. That was one of my companies.
Mm-hmm.
You spent $1.1 million in order to mine the Bitcoins in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
That's the tax office finding of facts.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that means?
So I think I'm the only person who spent $1 million and a bit in 2009 on Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Most likely, yes. I'm actually quite familiar with that private ruling because going back, I was working for CoinDesk at the time, and I interviewed you about it back then. Mm-hmm. And back then, I knew nothing about Bitcoin, and I was just really happy that government officials were using the word Bitcoin and acknowledged that it exists. Yeah. And I said, "Well, isn't that a good thing?" And you said, "No, it's asinine." And it was kind of a schooling because. I thought, well, all right, okay, I'm obviously looking at this incredibly naively. You know, there's a lot more going on than I thought.
Yeah, I know. I remember trying to get all this in, and we had an interview way back then before Silk Road hit, I think.
Probably, yeah. My memory's a bit hazy, but it's around that time.
That was when the government didn't think I was evil.
Uh-huh.
And I was working with APRA and others to get a registered bank and a license for banking and everything in Australia. And then before we had the license issued, Silk Road.
Uh-huh.
And then the next thing is, Bitcoin's evil, Bitcoin's for drugs. And I'm sitting there going, no. And
yeah, well, that's what I thought too. You know,
running from governments who keep going, you created evil things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, up until that point, all I'd heard was Silk Road, Mt. Gox, you know, tax evasion, that kind of thing. It was kind of nice to be hearing them discuss it in a rational manner, or in a way I didn't consider, you know, like FUD.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Here I am trying to say, actually, government can track it. Government can automate payment of GST.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually have it where instead of companies having to record all your VAT or GST and pay it every 3 months and have all the problems that happen with fraud and people running out of money or errors or whatever else. I mean, I keep saying, imagine what happens if you go to the till and you tap and the money never goes to the shop. It goes straight to the government.
Mm-hmm.
That would actually make everyone's life simpler.
Yeah.
As someone in business, you would get an instant refund of any money from when you make a payment. As someone in sort of who's just a consumer, you don't need to worry about tax anymore. It just happens. The government would get their money 3 to 6 months earlier, which there's value in that as well. The fraud rate would go down because there's no incentive in holding a bank account full of this money so that you can pay every 3 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm. So, with all of the things that you say publicly about eliminating fraud, eliminating corruption, and then you say the government thinks you're evil. When did that switch? I haven't actually heard any government say that you're evil, by the way.
Oh, talk to the Australian Tax Office, or I mean, even the silly judge, magistrate in the ruling here said that you created an anonymous cryptocurrency. Bitcoin's anything but anonymous. It's the least anonymous cryptocurrency in human history.
Yeah, that's right. And I saw the word anonymous pop up again in the Judge Reinhardt's order this week.
I keep saying Bitcoin is not anonymous, and everyone goes, "You said Bitcoin's anonymous." No, Thamos and Michael Marquette and Ross Ulbricht ran around going, "Bitcoin's anonymous," and I keep going, "Bitcoin's not anonymous, guys."
Yeah, people are.
It's not a good drug coin. It's not anonymous. It's not a good crime coin. It's not anonymous. It is actually something where if you're doing criminal activity for it, 20 years later, someone will track you down. We saw just a few weeks ago, there was another guy from Silk Road finally moved some of his Bitcoins and was nabbed. Guess what? This is going to get easier and easier for the government. As we're moving forward, as we tokenize fiat, as we move all these things, you're going to find that there will be people grabbed 40 years after the event for certain crimes now. They'll go, no one will think of me now, and bang, you're gone.
Which is a bit of a scary thought, again, considering crimes that everyone agrees are crimes, no problem at all. But things that become crimes later on, that does concern me a little bit. If freedom of speech is really, starts to be impinged upon in future years, it does worry me what they might do a bit.
Bitcoin still makes that easy. It makes it really hard to stop freedom of speech. So.
Well, I like the sound of that.
I mean, you could actually have Chinese government say to people who aren't miners, as the Bitcoin blockchain gets bigger, you're going to filter these things in China. But that would only be a filtering. Yeah. So double hashing and transactions mean you can actually validate one layer of hashes and still not deliver the content and prove that something's in a block. But it doesn't mean you stop it globally. So, I mean, I can't change the fact that Chinese government controls will put controls in China. Yeah. I'm not going to poke the gorilla and go, "Hey, China, you can't stop me." That's a stupid thing to do. What I'm going to do is say, things are free and they're available. And if someone puts it there, then eventually someone's going to look back at history and know the shenanigans you're up to. Do you want to be remembered as the guy who tried to crush people, or the guy who helped get rid of corruption and made things free? And that's the way I would look at doing this. Just pressure. It's like water. Water doesn't erode mountains in a day, but it slowly seeps in. And as weather changes, it expands and cracks evolve. And so...
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind being known as the guy who crushed the corruption, if that's at all possible.
So, well, it'll take a long time. I mean, this is a 50-year thing, in my opinion. It's going to take generational changes. It's going to take people having new technology, accepting things. So eventually, but it'll take a while.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be here in 50 years to see how that all pans out, but I hope that by the time I leave this world, it's heading in a little more of a positive direction.
I'll be old, but I'm going to say I still want to be here.
Well, good luck with that. I like your chances better than mine. So, in Florida, nobody called you evil, but I did get a slight wry smile out of the line that you were a latter-day Dr. Frankenstein, that you had created something that had run away from you, and that you were appalled yourself to see that it was being used for crime. Do you think that comment is in any way justified? I mean, Dr. Frankenstein is not a villain. He's a fairly ambiguous character.
Yeah, he's normal. And I am too, and I have human foibles and human problems and whatever else. So if I look at that, I mean, I hope I'm not Dr. Frankenstein, because Dr. Frankenstein's monster runs around and kills all his family.
Yeah, well, I think he went back and killed Dr. Frankenstein in the end, didn't he? I haven't actually read it.
Yeah, but I mean, Dr. Frankenstein's wife and family got killed by his his creation. So hopefully, I mean, I'm hoping I don't end up like Dr. Frankenstein, and I don't want anything happening to my family. So,
well, personally, I can think of a million better metaphors for Bitcoin than Frankenstein's monster, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it had a period where it got out of control. A whole lot of stupid things were happening where people like Michael Marty and Ross and a few others, like that idiot over in Thailand, were all building out these little drug empires. But in some ways, Bitcoin's actually showed its strength in that. If you look at it, the fact that in the first couple of years, over 100 people were arrested. And then people say, oh, well, it shows how corrupt everyone is because the law enforcement, like this cop got arrested too because he stole Bitcoin. Good. This FBI agent with problems and all the rest stole Bitcoin. And guess what? He was caught.
Mm-hmm. You're talking
Think about what that
Mark
does
Force
for law enforcement. Imagine now that you're working on this. Really tempting. Imagine having millions of dollars when you never earned more than a shitty little cop salary, and suddenly it's there. It's tempting.
Absolutely.
But the temptation goes when you know you can be tracked, when you know you can be caught, when you know it's not anonymous. That actually brings sunlight into the police force. When police know that they can be monitored, when police know that they will be watched, we get this thing where instead of being slowly corrupted with the brown paper bags and cash and everything like that that's happened here in Britain and in Australia and all the time in the US, where people now have an incentive to be honest, knowing that someone could be setting them up, knowing that they have to be afraid of any money that they take under the table. Not because they get caught then, but they get caught 10, 15 years down the track.
Well, I think the FBI agent and the Secret Service agent involved in the Silk Road case, they perhaps didn't understand Bitcoin enough themselves because they obviously thought it was anonymous enough for them to get away with. And so, they're now doing time. Not as much time as Ross Ulbricht, but still.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine how that sort of thing will change the world. Everyone says, oh, isn't this evil? People will find out all our stuff. No, they will only find out you did wrong. And here's what happens when you talk about peer-to-peer transactions. It brings in the old-fashioned way of doing things that actually worked, not the suck up everything NSA sort of view the world from above thing, but actually proving by going out to individuals and watching transactions and doing old-fashioned human intelligence, because now we have a record between the two. Imagine you have someone who is an espionage agent. Now they're going to hand money over. Where do they hand the money to? Well, now you have a record. You can actually start tracking all these things that are bad.
Yeah, I think people are going to definitely think twice about that in the future. It's probably stopped a few cases already, I would say.
Well, hopefully, and as people start to realize just how easy it is to track Bitcoin if you've done something nefarious, but how private it can be if you've done something that is okay, they're going to start seeing it differently. So imagine in the white paper, we're saying the privacy section says identities. It doesn't say your identity, firewall, other stuff. Transactions are separated from identities. That means you and I have our identity. So if I buy something from your shop, you can know who I am. You have a record. When you get a tax audit, you can go, here's the goods I sold, here's the amount I got paid. When you buy something, you now have a way of proving you didn't steal it, that you paid for the fuel, that you didn't go and leave the service station without paying, that you actually have a receipt. When something breaks, when your TV fails and you've lost the invoice, now you can go back to the blockchain and it's there.
Yeah. Well, as someone who always loses receipts, that would be handy at least.
Oh, I hate having all these things in paper and everything else.
Yeah.
I've got boxes and boxes of records going back for years. I've got scans going back for years. It's horrible.
Well, I think certain people in Florida might be interested in seeing some of those records as well. And I promise I'm going to stop talking about this soon. But people are asking here and in the chat room, they want to know when is this going to end? Like, when do you see this being over? Or is this something that's going to go for a long time?
We haven't even got through discovery yet.
Yeah.
This is where people go wrong. They're all sitting there going about this stuff, about so-and-so said something about me and whatever else. Well, guess what? We haven't even started giving out our evidence yet.
To clarify,
it's about to start.
Just to clarify, you have not been ordered to pay anything at this stage. Is that correct?
There's no order to pay yet. It still has to go through a trial and all the rest. And without having, just an order from a magistrate isn't enforceable in England anyway. And I'm not living in America, and I have no assets in America. So. Yeah.
Well, as long as the British courts don't get involved with that, I guess you're okay. As if you don't travel to America too much. But then, you would
traveling
have
has no relevance. I mean, it doesn't matter if you travel. It's not a criminal act.
Yeah. Yeah, although if you're sought by the authorities in one country, I mean, you wouldn't really want to cross their borders that often.
But this isn't being sought. This is a civil case. This is not criminal.
I know. Yeah.
So, I mean, even if you're bankrupt, you're allowed to travel. You have to file with your bankruptcy people, whatever else. So none of that changes.
Well, I think this is the part that I really wanted to clarify because, even in Bitcoin SV circles, there's still a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding going on from people who haven't read it. And yes, this is a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter. Nothing has been referred to a criminal court. And the judges...
No jury yet.
Yeah.
No judgment.
Will there be a jury?
Eventually.
Okay, that's interesting. That could make a big difference to it, I think.
Yeah, well, you see, the reason we have juries is they're very, very good. Average people have a better understanding of reality than lawyers and judges. That's why we have 12 average people. And that's what justice is about. Judges and lawyers deal with cases all the time. So they're jaded. The reality is judges have no idea about the reality of guilt or innocence or anything like that because they put up with too many cases day in, day out. That's why they need juries. That's why juries make decisions.
They're also sometimes a little too familiar with the personal lives of the lawyers involved in the case too, Exactly. Maybe they move in the same circles, go to the same clubs, that kind of thing. Play golf on the same courses. Yeah, I'm a fan of juries. I like to see it removed from that little legal bubble that they live in. So yeah, it's a civil case, and the only order is an instruction to the other court. So this was just a procedural matter. It doesn't actually command you to do anything.
Oh yeah, no. There needs to be a judgment before that finalizes.
We're seeing all sorts of things about in what form do you have to pay? Do you have to hand over private keys, or do you have to send BTC to someone via the usual channels, which would make things interesting as far as the forked assets go. Or whether you would have to fork the coins first and then send them. None of that has been decided.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, so we're really no closer to finding out what's going to happen or what's happened than we were a couple of months ago. So I think everyone just...
The world is sitting there making judgments on part of the information as normal.
Yeah.
This is crypto fake news Twitter, which runs around going, nothing happened and it's all a lie and blah, blah, blah. So no one's actually seen what the partnership was. Not that there was a partnership, but like what the judge is saying was a partnership. Sorry, there's a better way of putting it. What the LLC was, who the members were, how it was set up, any of that yet. So none of the other people involved with the start of information defense have been sort of brought in yet.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, saying to people wait and see just doesn't really get many clicks and follows, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I don't really give a rat's.
No, neither do I.
I'm not here for clicks and followers. I'm here to build technology.
Yes.
And actually, I'm here to build technology that is fairly much anti-Twitter, anti all that sort of evil Facebook, Twitter type fake news, promote terrorism type situation.
I'm totally okay with anything that's anti-Twitter and anti-Facebook.
Really it's just a platform for terrorists to communicate.
That's an interesting take on Twitter. I've heard it's a platform for trolls, but never terrorists before, to be honest.
Well, a lot of the, if you look at Arab Spring, Syria, whatever else, there's a lot of communication between terrorist groups. The Americans have been trying to stop a lot of this for a long time. It's well known within intelligence circles that, Twitter makes a lot of money from terrorism.
Interesting quote.
So these people who set up things and pay for adverts, one of the things that you end up with is fake news and things like that actually is a big thing in terrorist circles, putting out things to have false views of what's really occurring, to recruit. Terrorism recruitment has taken off because of Twitter. One of the reasons you don't see beheadings or anything like that coming out anymore was people started to realize they didn't get followers by doing that sort of stuff. By putting out this evil American we've captured, we're going to behead him. Videos might have got you clicks, but it didn't get you followers. So Twitter has actually changed a lot of how sort of the younger generation of terrorists are starting to recruit people now.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I'm disappointed that I can't just chop up someone's head and get more followers that way, because I was looking for a better plan. But guess I'll try a different PR strategy. Yeah, I don't know why that stuff is so popular. I honestly don't, but it seems that it is. Anyway, one other legal thing. Peter McCormack, what's the deal with him? Speaking of clicks and follows, he seems to be chasing more and more of them, and you seem to be his biggest ticket to getting them.
That's fine.
That's fine. Yeah, when does that kick off?
It's already kicking off, but everyone seems to think you just click your fingers and a court case is done.
Yeah, well, most people will have no idea what a legal procedure is actually like.
Well, one that I had that started in 2003 finally ended in 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's probably one of the shorter ones.
I don't know about shorter, but lots of things go that way, between appeals, redoing things, moving different areas between courts, all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
No one seems to understand that the final outcome of my 2003 court case that everyone sort of looks on the negative bits was I have 2 orders and judgments against the now defunct company. But anyway, very Pyrrhic victory.
Well, legal system's full of Pyrrhic victories too, I'd say. All right, let's not talk about court cases. It doesn't matter too
much when you win, but sort of effectively the company that you won against is dead. But anyway, that's life.
Yeah, and I guess that happens a lot too. All right, just getting away from the legal drama. Sorry, viewers. I know you like to hear about the legal drama, but we do want to talk about Bitcoin SV, because that's what we have to spend most of our lives talking about, not court cases.
Bitcoin, BSV is Bitcoin, all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. All right, well, I'm going to move on to the Twitter questions here, and I'm just going to run through them one by one so that we don't run out of time. First one is from Future Real Sam. He says, according to Dr. Wright, there will only be one public blockchain, or none. I agree. And when that happens, what programming language he thinks will be the dominant ones and most useful to build and interact with blockchain apps, whether mobile or desktop? Well, there you go. There's a change of topic for you.
Well, that's a hard question, in that effectively script, when it's in its native format, is similar to, it's a Forth-like language, but it's like programming in assembly. So if you're a game developer, there's lots of game developers who write things in assembly code, and the best ones to make fast, agile games still create either in C or assembly code. But then when they've created these engines, they go to things like Steam and they load them on Steam, and other people use game engines and Steam and everything like that to build on. So if you're a app developer from iPhone, you're going to do something different to the low-level guys. But at the end, it all compiles into assembly code.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to see is we're going to see compilers, and they will take higher-level languages that may be like Java, maybe like Perl, maybe like Python, Django, or Ruby, or whatever else. I'm old, so past Python. Yeah.
Right.
I've done Ruby coding before, but
I think I got past Python after I'd tried it for about a day, I think. If someone was considering building blockchain apps, I mean, do you have a personal preference for a programming language, or it's just really not important?
No, it's not really important. I mean, it has to be something. I mean, the protocol is fairly set, so it's really creating something that fits in with the protocol and the language.
Yeah.
Now, what would be interesting that we're going to start talking about more and more is for people to have like payment channels that actually run part of applications, where they start doing atomic swaps, where they start actually exchanging during games and only settle periodically.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be a different thing once again. So we've got a long way to go. I mean, we've got we're back in the 80s of SDK land, and we need to get up to 30 years from here. And it's going to take time to do. We're really at Bill Gates with BASIC and trying to get people to code on a Sinclair or a like I actually had a digital rainbow back in the day.
Mm-hmm. A digital rainbow.
Big, horrible thing with about this high, weighed about 20 kilos, had a 5 megabyte hard drive that cost me $20,000. All my sort of work and whatever else after hours, cooking and everything like that went into buying horrendously expensive hard drives that basically became less efficient than a few floppy drives very quickly. But
that actually sounds quite impressive for the 80s. Did all the lights dim when you turned that on?
Fairly much. It was actually one of the first dual CPU machines. It had both an 8088 and a Z80.
Mm-hmm.
So you could actually run CPM in multi-user mode. So that would allow you to have like 4 people simultaneously working on terminals.
That's amazing. I had an Apple II Plus. That was about the extent of my.
I even had multiple colors because I had a Hercules CTA card.
Uh-huh. Oh dear. All right. Well, moving on from tech to art, we've got a question from Sam Cox. Now I got to ask Sam's questions because he's a nice guy, and he also made the theme music for this show. So gotta get the plug in for Sam. All right. He says, I'd be interested to know how you view or value art as work. Is creating art adding to society, or is it merely an egotistical motive of self-portrayal?
Depends. Is it art
deep
we're talking about, or some of this crap that people buy because they think is expensive? They're not the same thing. I actually have studied art history, and one of my many degrees that I don't talk about is I have I did a BA in art history, studying some of the Dutch masters. In particular, one day I'll release it, but my bachelor dissertation was on Van Eyck.
Mm-hmm.
And most people go, who the hell's he?
A painter? He's not a painter, is he?
He's a painter, yes.
Oh, okay, right.
Don't you even know your Dutch masters?
I know nothing about Dutch masters, except that many of them start with Van. That's about the extent of my knowledge, I have to say.
Van Eyck was pretty good. I like Van Eyck. That's why I studied him.
Okay. Well, did you by studying art history, like, did that change your view of art? I mean, what did those guys do as a career? Did they just paint all the time? How did they earn a living?
It depended, but a lot of them would do commission. So you would be paid to do portraits and things like that. So remember, there weren't selfies or photos or anything like this. So when people got married or they had children or whatever else, a lot of people who are wealthy wanted to have a picture on the wall. You still see lots of old pictures of some guy on the wall, and that happened. But on top of that, there was a lot of innovation around that time. So you had a lot of still lifes. So people don't realize the innovation in just painting a bowl of fruit. People go, that's boring or whatever else. But a lot of the Dutch masters did things like painting a series over time. So you would have the bowl of fruit when it's pristine, and some would even do then the bowl of fruit when it's decayed.
I am familiar with that, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a genre we don't see much of these days.
No, and it's capturing part of life. It's capturing what happens. It's capturing the decay normal in existence. It's capturing how we change. Thinking about youth versus old age, etc. Imagine a world where there's no selfies, where there's no picture cameras. I mean, I'm still old enough to remember having a Kodak Brownie, and the film cost huge amounts of money for a poor kid. And so once a year I'd get a few rolls of film, maybe like 324 things, and get it developed. That would be sometimes like a birthday present. And that would give me 3 lots of 24 that I have to make sure I did really well. And you didn't want to have screwed up photos. So you stand there and you make people get the right position, and you wait till you got the right shot, click. Because if you did it wrong, that's a large cost for you. Now you just take, like I do. My wife complains because I take too many photos, and my answer to her is, I'll get the right one eventually.
Oh man, I had a roll of 24 or 36 film that spanned 2 years once. I think by the time they got developed, the older ones had a brown tinge to them or something, because it'd just been sitting in the camera for too long.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so in other words, yes, art is adding to society, and it is making a contribution.
Yes, I wish people would get things right and understand what they're talking about, though. I mean, some of the problem is people quite often don't understand enough about what they're saying, and a lot of problems actually come from sort of people interpreting what the artist wants to say.
Yeah.
There are things where art critics have actually said they know more about the art than the creator. The creator doesn't understand their own art very well. We're going to explain it.
I've heard several film directors say that too. Like people interpret meaning in their work that was never intentionally in there. And then the critic says, well, it was in there. It was just subconscious. You didn't know about it.
I know. I mean, or even getting the name wrong. I mean, one that always annoyed me was Rodin and the Thinker. The Thinker isn't the Thinker. The Thinker was actually named in 1912 or something like that by some New York Times journalist who just called it the wrong name. He didn't bother finding out what it was actually called. And he just said, this is the Thinker, and pondered what it could mean, saying this is Rodin thinking about human sort of foibles and considering aging and death and whatever else, which it never was. It was actually, it was Dante. If you have read anything about where he was in just outside the entrance of hell, where he'd taken around, what do you call it, purgatory by Virgil. And he sees the gate and he's pondering, should I go in? Should I do this? And he's sitting there contemplating the universe, heaven and hell. and it's actually Dante as he was led by Virgil before he met Beatrice.
I did not know that.
No one reads Dante anymore, so what can I say? I keep pointing out these things and people go, who's Dante?
Well, even I haven't read enough Dante, to be honest. So what is the actual official title of that artwork? The one they call a thinker.
Dante contemplating something. I can't remember. It's in French, so I can't remember.
Maybe that's why people don't remember it, because in French, I know the Mona Lisa is not actually called the Mona Lisa, and the Statue of Liberty is not called the Statue of Liberty. Nobody knows the official names of those works.
Well, actually, the Statue of Liberty is Columbia.
Is what?
The goddess Columbia. Which is also the same woman on top of the Congress building. Which everyone cuts off the top. So if you look at the top of Congress, there's this dome. There's that little thing that no one looks at.
Yeah.
It's actually the same woman. It's Columbia again. She's standing on top of Congress.
No, I was aware that there was a statue on top of Congress. I just didn't know who it was. It
same
is Columbia. Interesting.
Yeah. And I bet you didn't know that they hadn't planned for the Statue of Liberty to go to America.
I didn't know that either. I know they have a few replicas in France.
No, it was actually going to go out to Brazil or somewhere like that first, and a whole lot of political shifts. Oh, well, we'll send it to America and show we're friends.
Well, Brazil got a very nice, Art Deco Jesus.
Yeah, so they've got theirs.
Okay, good.
That would be too easy.
Alrighty then, just moving on. Oh yeah, we got Andreas Olivas says your involvement in the 2 books that have recently been published. Now there's one I saw just the other day. Where is that? This one, Satoshi's Vision: The Art of Bitcoin by Craig Wright. Did you write that?
Well, basically what we have there is a simplified compilation of my blog posts. So yes, the aim here is to try and put together in a easier to follow version with a bit more information, all the things I've been writing about over the years in my blog. So it's probably 80% my blog posts edited, turned into something a bit more readable, put into a logical order, because I think of something and write a blog post and I don't necessarily have it. So it's a structured version of my ramblings.
Well, it would be handy to have all of that in the one place.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that is an official Craig Wright authored book in some form or another. Are you collecting royalties on that from Amazon?
Yes. So you can say that one, yes.
Very good. I certainly hope someone at some point doesn't try to grab a share of that from you.
Oh, I'm sure someone will.
It's the price of fame.
Tell me about it. But, unfortunately.
Okay. What was the other book? You said there were 2. I only know of that one.
That's the only one of mine. So I can't really say about what other people are doing.
All right, now I can see we're going to run out of time again, so I'm just going to try and run past a few of these just from the top. If your question didn't make it into the list, I apologize, and I promised to put you first last time. Just remind me. Next one.
I'll go over a little bit.
Yeah. Someone wants to hear your Thunderblast wants to hear your opinion on Ripple Xrp. This should be good. He says he'd like to see some posts describing the issues with XRP. Now, is it a worthy asset or is it?
So,
what's that?
Why would I waste my time
talking about XRP?
Yeah, I've called it cripple in the past and things like this, made fun of it. But the reality is, why even bother? It's like, if you're Microsoft, do you really care that there's some small operating system that runs on old machines that requires you nail your hand to the wall and try and type on the other side to use it. And that's about what Ripple is.
Right.
It doesn't get much more useless.
Well, it's something that I get asked a lot too. I mean, some people think game tokens that are completely centralized and issued by one company are completely legit assets. And if they can trade them and trade them later for us for a bigger price, then that's all they care about.
Yeah.
But as far
Go pay tax.
Alrighty.
Remember, all these things are going to be taxed too. So I think a lot of traders seem to forget that all these things are going to come out, and if you've been trading Bitcoin, you're going to be paying tax on it in 10 years' time if you haven't done it now, except what they're going to do is double your tax.
Well, it's just as well I don't own and never have owned any Bitcoin then, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Where are we?
Alrighty. Oh, here we go. Here's a good question to end with, and I think we can answer this in many ways. Stephen Tara says, I would like to ask him if he coded the first version of Bitcoin himself, and if it was him who put a mini poker game inside, and why.
If you read my LLM, my dissertation, I actually chuck in Lassiter's in there and a bit of a rant.
Mm-hmm. Lassiter's the casino. Right?
Mm-hmm. Lassiter's were a casino started in 1997, 8, whatever else, about 1997 or 8 it started, and I was working on them back at the I was there doing InfoSec and some of the issues around technology before it went live. So when Deloitte couldn't get over the government hurdle and couldn't get the things in there to have reporting correctly, I was brought in, basically to help Lassiter's get over that hurdle. And so I helped Lassiter's become the first online casino in the world that had a valid government license.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2005, the American government started their gambling crackdown. The Australian government had put a moratorium on gambling because of the Americans, and no more licenses were going to be issued. There was only one other company that I was involved with too, which was in Queensland. I can't remember their name. Started with G, but it was a Queensland gaming company. So the two licensed casinos in Australia were ones that I dealt with. And we were also dealing with Playboy Gaming at the time, which we were going to actually set up casinos in Canberra, and then Playboy would be able to have branded gaming applications around the world. But unfortunately, the Americans had this anti-gambling thing and anti-bookmaking and everything like that. So a lot of other companies I was working with had problems. CenterBet got away okay. Sporting Bet, I remember I was in the offices in Australia, and when I can't remember his name, the CEO got arrested. He stepped out of a plane in the US. It's a British company, by the way. And he stepped out, and the Americans arrested him for sort of gambling offenses.
See, I told you they'd do that.
So, but this was different. I mean, he got off. It was just a big stunt, but killed the price, the share price of Sporting Bet,
right,
for a while, and didn't help with some of the mergers and everything. It was well timed to cause some pain.
So, is there a mini poker game built into the original Bitcoin code?
There's a stub to actually load the poker game into. The original stuff was doing it, but it was the code was fairly different before it launched. The block time, everything else was all very different. What there was a different version. So the stubs for the poker game were still in the original Bitcoin. But what it had was a marketplace the marketplace would have been something like an eBay, a decentralized version thereof. It had the stubs for an identity system. It had the stubs for like the poker table. And everyone bitches at me now because no one likes Texas Hold'em anymore for some reason. I still like Texas Hold'em, so
it's fine with
whatever.
Me. Yeah. Alrighty then, and yeah, one last thing is.
Oh, and the other thing was, my poker games were the ugliest ever. I got told too. I can do the back ends. I can't do pretty front ends, and they get worse and worse over time.
I've heard you say that before. Yeah. Well, speaking of back ends, how about Unwriter? Is Unwriter getting any closer to revealing who he or she is? Are we ever going to find out? No comment.
I guess eventually. I'm hoping he comes out and tells everyone. That's up to him. When he does it is his choice.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Alrighty.
I hope he decides to come out and sort of publicly start building and raising capital. When is up to him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's probably a lot of people out there who just want to buy him a beer.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that probably just about wraps it up. Salty says, what a waste of time talking about Ripple. I totally agree, Salty, and I apologize for that, but it was in the list. What can you do? I think if you're coming as a newcomer to crypto, like, these things do need to be explained over and over. Like, just because someone debunked it back in 2013 or something doesn't mean that everyone's going to read that. So, yeah, some things, unfortunately, we do have to rehash. And, yeah, looking forward to 2020. I think people are going to be very curious to see what happens there. Like, I know it's all game theory strategy and you don't gain anything by telling people what you're going to do, but should we be excited about 2020?
We should be excited about the growth of Bitcoin.
Well, I'm always excited about the growth of Bitcoin.
There you go.
Okay, well, let's continue that on in 2020. Bitcoin 2020. Continue to be excited and keep building, people. Like, just less time tweeting, more time building stuff.
Yeah, let's start thinking about honest apps, things that allow people to trade, allow people to interact directly, allow people to have records, allow people to not worry about crime, to be safer. That's what we want in this world.
And do you think that there's a place for media people too? You know, like, asking on a fairly personal level there, because I've,
real ones, or some of these things that people try and pass off as journalism.
Well, I certainly hope there's no future for that, but yeah, real journalism, of course. Is there a future for real journalism?
I hope so. I hope the addition of cost to the internet, not just advertising, where there's a hidden cost and people like Google are stealing your value so that they can make money, but not like Facebook and their stuff where they steal your information. And that's the only way to put it. They steal your information.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you may not even be on Facebook and Facebook suck away information from you. Where do you get value of that? Theft. So Facebook, evil.
I tried to stay off LinkedIn for a year, and I think I heard more from them in that year than I did when I was a member. Eventually, I just rejoined.
Exactly. Yeah, we want you back.
I gave up.
Join us. Come back. Come back to the cult.
Ah, yes. Well, that's a topic for another time.
We want people to start valuing information again. If you think about how things used to be, you used to actually have people value what is read, what is actually out there. It wasn't about how often we can make someone click on a headline, but actually the content and capturing an audience.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. That's what we need to get back to.
I'm pretty depressed about the state of the media today, like mainstream and industry media. So anything that will improve that, I would like to be part of it.
Sounds good to me.
Alrighty then. Well, thanks once again, Craig Wright, for joining us on the MetaNetTV live stream. You're always welcome to join, as you know. Yeah, I guess if
And
you...
I'll recommend that people go out there and have a look at sort of the Italian Renaissance works by that nice little famous painter, Jan van Eyck, E-Y-C-K. Nice little paintings of guys with red towels. It's actually making fun of it, but there are some great things. Francis of Assisi and Stigmata is a magnificent work. And a lot of the generalized stories about Viennese sort of commissions and whatever else, all worth it. If you really care about art, forget some of this trash that you see out there with like a Jackson Pollock, where someone gets drunk and falls on their canvas and we call that art.
I'm not really a Pollock fan.
We want to have something where someone has created, not just created something as a great artwork, but invented new forms of paint. I mean, like Jan van Eyck actually, like Da Vinci and others, created their own paint. So they mixed things like egg yolks and different oils and whatever else to actually make the paint that they use.
That's something
Knowing the story is important. So my recommendation for people. There you go.
Okay, well, I totally agree. However, personally, I'm going to go and read some Dante because that sounds a lot more exciting to me. Nothing against Peters. I just prefer dark stories, so I'm going to go with that. All right, well, thank you once again, Craig Wright. And please, here's a plug for us too now. Go and check out some real Bitcoin news on MetaNet.id. That's the news site for MetaNetTV. We're just starting out. We've only got about a month's worth of articles there, but yep, they are all very good articles, and you can check out on the MetaNetTV channel interviews with every single one of our contributors, as well as all the past live streams.
Yeah, if you want a sort of simple summary of all the stuff I've been ranting about, the creation of Bitcoin and all the rest, feel free, have a read of the book. It's in a format that you can take on a plane rather than having to load 50 million blog posts. So you can actually read through it and understand.
Excellent.
And realize it's not about drug markets and terrorism. Bitcoin's not about secrecy. It's about enabling people.
I think I may even buy it myself.
Sounds good.
After I read Dante.
Even better.
All right, then. Thanks a lot, Craig. And see you again some other time. Later.
Will do. Have a great day.